What if the one place you chose to escape the war in your head was already haunted by a different kind of war? For retired Navy SEAL Ethan Cole, that place was supposed to be nothing more than a broken structure on a forgotten mountain, a quiet ruin where no one would ask about the scars on his body or the nightmares behind his eyes. But the mountain had its own scars, and the first one to sense it was his German shepherd, Rex. The rain over Phoenix isn't dramatic. It's thin and hesitant, a half-hearted drizzle that streaks across neon signs and turns the freeway into a sheet of smeared light. Cars hiss past in endless lines. People hurry from parking lots to doorways with their shoulders hunched and their phones glued to their palms. Ethan Cole walks among them like a ghost. 6'2", broad-shouldered, built from years of grinding physical work, he moves with the controlled economy of someone who has spent too long in hostile places. His brown hair is cropped short, his jaw is shadowed with stubble, but it's his eyes that give him away. Gray, flat, always scanning. He doesn't flinch when a truck horn blares, doesn't start when a car backfires 2 blocks over. His body does. A tiny twitch in his shoulder, a tightening of his jaw. The reflexes are carved too deep. At his side, matching his pace step for step, walks Rex. The German Shepherd is a massive presence in a world of glass and traffic. A thick-coated, sable-furred wall of muscle and focus. A pale scar runs along his flank, hidden under fur unless the light hits just right. His ears are pricked, his eyes constantly sweeping their surroundings, cataloging sound, motion, scent. He's not a pet, he's a partner, the only one Ethan has left. They walk because if they don't, Ethan doesn't sleep. 3 hours every evening. City blocks, parking garages, empty lots behind strip malls. Walk until muscle fatigue pulls the volume down on the memories. Walk until his brain is too tired to replay the moment the radio went dead. The moment air support never came. The moment Leo's hand went slack in his. Tonight, the route is the same as always. Down 7th Avenue, past the shuttered laundromat, left at the flickering liquor store sign. Ethan's hands are buried in the pockets of his jacket, fingers unconsciously counting. 1, 2, 3, 4. Like he used to count breaths between incoming rounds. Rex walks so close their shoulders brush. By the time they climb the stairs to Ethan's apartment on the 5th floor, his clothes are damp and his knee is starting to throb, the old injury pulsing in time with his heartbeat. The building smells like burnt toast and cleaning fluid. Somewhere, a baby cries. A TV laughs too loud through a thin wall. Ethan's apartment is just as anonymous as the hallway. White walls, a table, a couch, a mattress on a metal frame, no pictures, no souvenirs from the teams, no flags, no medals on the shelves. He tried that once. Staring at a shadow box in the dark didn't make the weight on his chest any lighter. Rex does a quick perimeter check out of habit, around the sofa, into the bathroom, nose sweeping under the window. Satisfied, he pads back and sits in front of Ethan, head tilted, watching him like he's waiting for a cue. Ethan drops onto the couch and stares at the blank TV screen. The quiet is the worst. The world outside is muffled by rain and cheap insulation. And in that soft vacuum, the ghosts come crowding in. Desert heat, the smell of burned metal, Leo's voice rasping his name. A heavy head presses against his thigh. Rex doesn't paw at him or whine. He just leans in, putting his full weight into Ethan's leg like an anchor dropped into a current. Ethan's hand finds fur on instinct, fingers digging into the thick ruff at Rex's neck. The dog's breathing is steady, a slow in and out that fills the space with something solid and alive. "Yeah, buddy," Ethan mutters, voice gravelly from disuse. "I'm here. You're here. We're good." His laptop sits on the table, black screen waiting. He opens it not because he wants to, but because idle hands are a dangerous thing. News sites, gear reviews, articles he doesn't fully read, anything to drown out the noise inside his head. Tonight, his cursor drifts to something he never looks at: real estate. He scrolls past polished condos, desert ranch houses with perfect pools, new developments with smiling stock photo families. None of it touches him. Rex shifts. A low, almost inaudible rumble vibrates in his chest. It's not a warning, it's an alert. A tiny nudge of sound he used to make in villages when he scented something off. "What?" Ethan asks, half amused despite himself. "You see something you like?" You want a backyard, is that it? The next listing that loads is not a backyard. It's a grainy photo of a building clinging to the edge of a ridge under a bruised sky. Concrete walls stained dark, windows boarded up. A rusted steel tower rising behind it, skeletal against the clouds. The caption reads, "Former Fire Lookout, Decommissioned Monitoring Station, Black Mesa, New Mexico, as is, remote access, cash only." The price is a joke, less than a used pickup, less than what the VA deposit puts in his account every quarter. He scrolls through the few remaining photos. A cracked asphalt pad, a collapsed water tank. Inside, bare concrete floors, peeling paint, empty racks where equipment once stood. A huge bay window facing a drop into nothing, and a wilderness of mazes and red rock. It's ugly, harsh, isolated. To Ethan, it's beautiful. Not a house, a position, a place with its back to a cliff and its face to the horizon. One door in, one door out. A place where he can hear someone coming from a mile away. A place so far off the grid that the grid forgets it exists. Something loosens in his chest at the thought. Rebuild the structure, fix the roof, patch the walls, fight something he can hit with his hands instead of nightmares he can't punch. He feels Rex's gaze on him, hot and focused. The dog shifts again, putting a paw on Ethan's knee this time. "You felt it too, huh?" Ethan exhales. The decision hits him with the same sudden clarity as a call over the radio. Move now or lose the moment. "Guess we're headed to New Mexico," he says. His cursor hovers over the contact button, a short flurry of emails. A wire transfer that makes his bank app blink in confusion. An hour later, his phone buzzes with a simple message. "Property transfer complete. Mission acquired." The drive north and east is like peeling away layers of another life. The interstates give way to smaller highways, then to blacktop roads that ribbon through scrubland and low hills. Phoenix's orange glow fades in the rearview mirror. The sky grows bigger, the air drier, until the world is all blue and red and the faded yellow of desert grass. Rex rides shotgun, nose at the crack of the window, soaking in an ocean of new scents: dust, cattle, juniper, the faint metallic tang of distant thunderheads. By the time they reach the town of Sandrock, the sun is low. Sandrock isn't really a town. It's a handful of low buildings clustered around a two-pump gas station and a diner with a faded sign that reads, "Lucy's," a small county office, a feed store, a weather-beaten church squatting out on the edge like it's thinking about leaving. Ethan pulls the truck into the dirt lot beside the only general store in sight. Hand-painted letters above the door read, "Harris Supply and Grocery." The bell above the door jangles when he steps inside. The place smells of coffee, motor oil, and dry wood. Fluorescent lights buzz overhead. A radio plays old country music too quietly to identify the song. The man behind the counter looks like he's been carved from the same wood as the shelves. Early 20s, skinny but solid, with a mop of dark hair, a Sandrock High School hoodie, and eyes that flick up and down Ethan in one practice sweep. "Evening," the kid says. His name tag reads Luke. "Evening," Ethan replies, grabbing a cart. He loads it with bottled water, canned food, a couple of lanterns, a first aid kit, a coil of rope, an extra shovel. The basics. "You camping?" Luke asks as Ethan sets the supplies on the counter. "Not exactly." Ethan pulls a folded sheet of paper from his pocket and smooths it with 2 fingers. "Bought the old station up on Black Mesa?" Luke goes still. It's subtle. The way his shoulders tighten, the way his eyes flick toward the door, as if checking to make sure no one else heard. The boredom in his face drains out, replaced by something sharper and more guarded. "Station?" he repeats too casually. "You mean the observation post?" "That's what the paperwork calls it." Ethan slides his card across the counter. "You know it?" Luke scans his card, movement suddenly slow. "My granddad used to talk about the tower up there. Said you could see half the state from that window." He hesitates. "Said it wasn't right either." "How so?" Luke hands the card back. "Some places just got echoes," he says finally. "Up there, sometimes they sound like sirens, even when no sirens are running." His mouth twists like he regrets saying anything. "Anyway, roads wash out in storms. Watch the sky." "Thanks for the tip." Outside, an older man sits on a bench, a battered straw hat shadowing his face. His hands work methodically over a length of rope, fingers tying knots that look older than the town. His denim jacket has a sheriff's patch on the shoulder, long since sun-faded. Rex is already watching him from the truck, ears pricked. As Ethan loads supplies, the old man doesn't look up. "You're Cole," he says, like he's reading it off a file in his head. "Ethan Cole," Ethan confirms. The old man lifts his gaze. His eyes are pale, washed-out blue, but there's nothing weak in them. "Name's Harris. Used to be sheriff here. My daddy ran that station when it still had power." Ethan leans against the truck. "Your son in there?" The old man's mouth twitches. "Grandson?" Thinks he's subtle. His gaze slides over Ethan's hands, his posture, the scars he can see. Then his eyes drift to Rex, who's leaning slightly out the open window, sniffing the dry wind. "That mountain remembers things," Harris says quietly. "It remembers sirens and secrets and bad judgment made by men who never had to hear the screams themselves." "You think I should stay away?" Ethan asks. "I think men like you don't scare easy," Harris replies. "But some ghosts don't care how tough you are." He tilts his head. "Dog like that, though? Dog like that might hear something you don't." He goes back to his rope, conversation over. The road up to Black Mesa is barely a road at all. It climbs out of sandrock in long switchbacks, crumbling at the edges, the desert falling away beneath in layers of ochre and rust. Saguaros stand like silent sentries on the slopes. Thunderheads bruise the horizon, stacked high, their bellies lit with flickers of distant lightning. By the time Ethan's truck rattles into the cracked asphalt pad below the station, the sun has dipped below the line of mesas. A wind has kicked up, hot and restless, carrying the smell of rain that hasn't fallen yet. The building looms over them. 2 stories of concrete and steel, squat and angular, built into the rock like it grew there by accident. The tower out back is a skeletal spine of rusted beams and ladders, once crowned by radar dishes and antennas that now lie twisted in the dust. Ethan kills the engine. For a moment, it's utterly silent. No traffic, no voices, just wind whistling through the empty tower and the faint, distant grumble of thunder. Rex jumps out of the truck before Ethan can open his door, landing lightly on the cracked pavement. He does a quick circle, nose working furiously. His tail is low, not tucked, but his posture is alert in a way Ethan recognizes. New territory, unknown variables. "Let's clear it," Ethan says. The front door refuses at first, swollen in the frame from years of sun and rain. It finally gives with a hard shoulder and a groan of metal on metal. A gust of stale air rushes out. Dust, mouse droppings. Something faintly electrical beneath it all, like the memory of ozone. Ethan's flashlight cuts a pale tunnel through the dark. Inside, the first floor is one big open room. Concrete pillars, empty metal racks bolted to the walls. A giant window facing west, glass mostly intact. The last of the sunset bleeding through a film of grime. In the far corner, a steel stairwell climbs up to the second floor. Rex ranges ahead in a practice pattern, nose brushing along the walls, paws silent on the dusty floor. He disappears behind a pillar and reappears a second later, ears up, tail giving one slow wag. A silent status report. Clear. They sweep the first floor, then the second, which holds a row of small rooms. Offices, bedrooms, a mess area. Everything's stripped, no equipment, no documents, just peeling paint and outlines on the floor where a heavy furniture used to sit. Ethan checks closets, vents, corners. When he's satisfied, they go back downstairs. He unrolls a sleeping bag in a corner, sheltered from the window, sets a lantern in the middle of the room, and opens a can of chili from the grocery run. Rex eats his own food with single-minded focus, then settles with his back against the exterior wall, facing the room, eyes on the door. Outside, the sky darkens to a deep purple black. The first raindrops hit the roof with soft ticking sounds. Then, the storm arrives in earnest. Thunder cracking off the mesa like artillery. Rain hurling itself against concrete in waves. To Ethan, it's just weather. He's lain awake under worse, listening for footsteps on gravel between mortar strikes. Here, each boom is predictable, each hiss of rain just white noise. He lies back, arms folded under his head, feeling his body start to unclench. Rex is not relaxed. The dog's head swings toward the far wall and stays there, ears high, body rigid. His nose flares, then he lets out a sound Ethan hasn't heard from him outside of combat zones. A low, building growl that hums in his chest like a live wire. "Hey!" Ethan pushes himself up onto an elbow. "What is it?" Rex doesn't look away from the wall. The one that faces into the rock, not out over the drop. He takes 2 slow steps toward it, muscles tight. The growl drops to a quiet, urgent rumble. Ethan crosses the room and presses his palm to the concrete. Nothing. Cool, slightly damp. No vibration. He leans in, ear against the surface. The storm mutters overhead. Wind rattles something loose outside. Inside the wall, silence. He closes his eyes, filters. He's done this 1,000 times. Before, in buildings that were barely standing, listening for the difference between normal noise and hidden threats. A loose beam versus a tripwire. A rat versus a breathing man. There. A faint metallic sound, almost swallowed by the storm. Not quite a tap. More like a distant stuttering buzz. A pattern. Brief pause. Another stuttering buzz. Then nothing. He steps back. Old wiring, he tells himself out loud. Weather hitting some leftover junction box, that's all. Rex looks over his shoulder at him, and for a heartbeat, Ethan has the unnerving feeling that the dog doesn't buy it. "Sleep," Ethan orders gently. "We'll check it in the morning." Rex obeys the word, but not the spirit. He lies down near that interior wall, not at the door, and he doesn't quite close his eyes. Morning comes in layers. First, the storm's rage softens to a steady drip from the roof. Then pale light seeps through the dirty windows. Somewhere outside, a hawk cries, the sound thin and wild. Ethan wakes with every joint protesting. The concrete floor is unforgiving. Rex is already up, tail swishing once when Ethan rolls out of the sleeping bag. "Okay," Ethan says, stretching until his spine pops. "Let's see what you were so interested in." The wall is just a wall, smooth concrete, painted some once white shade that's now the color of old bone. No panels, no doors, no obvious seams. He walks its length slowly, palm flat, scanning for changes in texture or temperature. Rex pads along beside him, nose flickering, tracking some trail Ethan can't sense. About halfway down the wall, the dog stops dead. He plants his paws, leans forward, and sniffs a spot about knee-height with intense focus. His tail stiffens. He glances up at Ethan, then back at the wall, and lets out a single sharp huff. "Right there?" Ethan murmurs. He leans in, examining it. On the surface, nothing. Just paint. But there's a faint irregularity where the paint meets the floor, like a hairline crack, almost invisible under grime. He fetches a stiff brush from the truck and starts scrubbing. Dust rains down in gray clouds. Rex sneezes and steps back, watching. Underneath, a thin, almost imperceptible line emerges, running vertical for about 4 feet, then dog-legging sideways. It's not natural. It's a seam. Someone sealed a door here and did a careful job of hiding it. He runs his knuckles along it and knocks. Concrete knocks back, until he hits a point near the ground. The sound there is different, more hollow, a narrow echo instead of a solid thud. He smiles, a small, tight curve of his mouth. "Good nose," he tells Rex. The dog's ears flick in satisfaction. There's no handle, no hinge, just the faint outline of whatever used to open this thing. He spends the next hour with a hammer and chisel he brought for mundane jobs like repairing cracks in the floor. He uses them for something else instead, chipping away at the edge of the seam, bit by careful bit. Sweat trickles down his neck despite the cool morning air. Concrete dust coats his hands, his clothes, the tip of Rex's nose. Every few minutes he stops, listens, checks if anything shifts. Finally, his chisel punches through something that isn't concrete. The tip suddenly finds empty space and jerks forward, nearly pulling his hand with it. He widens the hole, then shines his flashlight inside. Darkness swallows the beam, but not entirely. He glimpses rusted metal, maybe the edge of a frame, old conduit, a cavity big enough for a man to crawl through. Some part of his brain whispers that this is a bad idea. The rest of him has already decided. It takes another hour to carve enough away that he can brute force the hidden panel inward. It gives with an awful grinding shriek, pulling flakes of paint and concrete with it, and swings open into a narrow corridor carved directly into the rock. Cool air spills out, carrying the scent of dust and something else. Oil, maybe. Old, but stubborn. "Stay," Ethan tells Rex automatically, even though he knows how this will end. He steps inside first, knees slightly bent, flashlight in one hand, the other hand hovering near the knife at his belt. Old habits, old drills. The corridor angles downward, only about 4 feet wide, the floor slabbed in concrete, the walls raw stone. Behind him, claws scrabble. Rex squeezes through the opening without waiting for a command, slotting in behind Ethan as neatly as if they were back in some village alley halfway around the world. Of course. Ethan's lips twitch. "Fine," he mutters. "Stack on me then." The passage slopes down 20, maybe 30 feet before it opens into a room. It's low-ceilinged and square, like someone poured a bunker into the mountain and forgot it. Ethan sweeps his light across work tables buried in dust, shelving units sagging under the weight of gray-shrouded objects, and a wall covered in panels, dials, switches, gauges with cracked glass. A monitoring station, not the Cold War-era console banks he remembers from training slides, but close. Analog bones of something once sophisticated. Dead center in the room stands a metal desk, bolted to the floor. On it sits an object that doesn't belong here at all. A cardboard box, newer, maybe 20 years old instead of 50. Tape yellowed but intact, no labels, no markings. His skin prickles. He's been in rooms like this before and learned one hard rule: what looks forgotten often isn't. Rex does his own sweep, snout tracing along walls and under shelves. He pauses at one dark corner, sniffs, then relaxes, tail lowering. No immediate threats. No moldy remains. Ethan approaches the desk. The tape peels under his fingers with a dry crackle. Inside, objects lie wrapped in plastic and old towels, a gas mask, a handheld radio, a stack of manila folders bound with a rubber band that snaps the second he touches it, and at the bottom, encased in a zippered nylon pouch, a pair of cassette tapes. He hasn't seen cassette tapes in years. On one, written in black marker, are 3 words that stop his breath in his throat. Black Mesa Log. On the other, in the same hand, "For whoever comes." He glances at Rex. The dog stares back, steady, as if waiting. "There it is," Ethan whispers. "The thing nobody wanted found." He doesn't listen to the tapes alone. Back upstairs, the storm has blown itself out, leaving the world washed in sharp, clean light. Ethan wires a cheap cassette player he picked up from a thrift store in Sandrock into an outlet he's painstakingly reconnected to a solar rig on the roof. The generator he hauled up the next day hums low, backing up the system. Rex sprawls by the big window, staring out over miles of empty land. Wind sets the grasses rippling like waves. Ethan slides the tape labeled Black Mesa Log into the player and hits play. At first, there's only static. Then, a voice crackles through, warped by time and cheap magnetic tape, but unmistakably human. Male, mid-30s maybe. Dry humor woven into the drawl. "This is Captain Mark Harlow, United States Air Force. Officially, Black Mesa Monitoring Station is a weather and forest fire observation post. Unofficially..." A pause, a sound that might be a short, humorless laugh. "We listen. We're Project Sundial," they tell us. "We're supposed to hear things the rest of the country can't." Ethan leans forward. What follows isn't a formal log. It's something between a confession and a testimony, a record never meant for an official archive. Harlow talks about late 1970s paranoia, about Soviet bombers and missiles, and the way the big men in big rooms were terrified of what they couldn't see coming, about new tech that used the ionosphere, bouncing signals, listening for anomalies in the hiss of the sky. But the tech wasn't all that made Black Mesa special. "We're not just listening to the air," Harlow says. "We're listening to people, towns like this one, Sandrock, places that don't have a vote but sure as hell have lungs. They use Sandrock as a testbed, sirens that would only trigger if readings hit certain levels. Emergency broadcasts that never aired, but would have if things went bad. Controlled burns and accidental chemical leaks so small the reports called them negligible." "Negligible," Harlow's voice bites. like my tech sergeant's cough, like the nosebleeds, like the way the kids in town started getting sick. Ethan's stomach knots. This isn't about enemy bombers at all. It's about what they were willing to do to their own. Harlow talks about the day the numbers spiked and stayed there. A solar flare, they said. A glitch in the instruments. Shut it down, don't log it. Then came the order. Destroy all data. Abandon station. Blame a lightning strike for whatever the next months would bring. We were supposed to erase ourselves, Harlow says. Erase this place. Erase what we heard. National security interest is a fancy way of saying, we'd rather let children die than admit we were wrong. His voice breaks for the first time. Not much, just enough. There was a fire that night. Not the slow, creeping brush fires Harlow had dealt with for years, but a sudden roaring wall of flame that climbed the ravine below the station like it had a personal grudge. It moved too fast, fueled by something more than dry brush. And we found out, Harlow says, voice low. Somebody had said it, a burn pattern like accelerant. On the one night our tower was ordered dark. The tape clicks off. Ethan ejects it with fingers that aren't quite steady and stares out the window. The view is breathtaking, mountains marching off in faded blue bands. A desert so vast it looks like an ocean caught mid-wave. Nothing, at a glance, that suggests betrayal. Then he slides the second tape in. For whoever comes. Static. Then the same voice, rougher now, tired. If you're hearing this, Harlow says, then either I was wrong and someone up there decided truth matters, or you're like me, someone who lost people to the silence. He talks faster now, like he's afraid of being interrupted. He names names, families in Sandrock who developed cancers in clusters, too many, too young. Men in his own crew who started to cough, then never stopped. He lists dates, incident numbers, frequencies they monitored, and then, I tried to report it. Went over my CO's head, thought someone in DC would care that we were poisoning our own. A bitter laugh. They cared enough to send a team, not to fix it, to bury it. They scrubbed medical records, reassigned Harlow, filed Black Mesa under decommissioned fire infrastructure, left the building to rot and the town to make up its own stories about sirens in the dark. I don't know who you are, he says, voice suddenly softer. But if you're here, I'm asking you one thing. Don't let them stay erased. Don't let the folks down in Sandrock keep thinking the mountain just hates them. Tell them. Tell someone. Put it where it can't be shredded this time. The tape ends mid-breath. Ethan sits very still. Rex lifts his head and rests his muzzle on Ethan's thigh, applying that same steady pressure he uses when Ethan's nightmares start. Because this isn't just Harlow's story anymore. It's Ethan's. Different operation, different war, same kind of lie, bad intel, glitchy drone feed. Command insisting the village was empty when it wasn't. Ethan's team dropped in anyway. The ambush sprang like a trap that had been waiting years, the air support that never came. Later, in some fluorescent-lit office half a world away, someone wrote a sentence that still chews at his bones. Unforeseen variables resulted in casualties. Unforeseen his ass. He clutches the edge of the table until his knuckles go white. Rex presses closer, leaning the full weight of his big body into Ethan's side. The dog doesn't whine or lick his hand. He just stays there, solid and warm and alive, the only thing that has never lied to him. Ethan lets his forehead drop onto his arm for a long moment. Anger and grief slam through him in jagged waves. Harlow with his tapes, kids in Sandrock breathing poisoned air, Leo bleeding out in dust that was supposed to be safe. 100 decisions made by men whose worst risk was a bad headline. When he finally lifts his head, something under the rage has hardened into resolve. Harlow's voice echoes in his mind. Don't let them stay erased. All right, Ethan says, hoarse. Okay, we won't. Rex's tail thumps once against the concrete. The town doesn't welcome him with open arms. Not at first. When he walks into the Sandrock Library, a squat brick building that looks like it used to be a bank, the woman at the front desk looks up with the practiced irritation of someone constantly interrupted by tourists asking for directions. She's in her late 40s maybe, with dark hair pulled into a low knot and reading glasses perched halfway down her nose. A small brass tag on her cardigan reads, Maya Ortiz, Librarian. Ethan approaches the desk with a folder under one arm. Rex waits patiently on the truck bed outside, within sight of the front window. "Can I help you?" she asks. "Hope so," Ethan says. "I'm Ethan Cole. Bought the station up on Black Mesa." Something flickers in her eyes. "You're the one," she says, not a question. "We've had our share of them. People who think it's fun to go camping where the sirens used to go off." "I'm not a tourist," he says. "So they all say." She flips a return stamp between her fingers like a coin. "What kind of help are you looking for, Mr. Cole?" "Records," he says. He taps the folder. "Specifically about Sandrock in the late 70s and early 80s. Environmental reports, medical records, anything that mentions the station by name. Black Mesa Monitoring, Project Sundial, anything like that." Now she goes very still. Her fingers stop playing with the stamp. Her gaze sharpens like a lens focusing. "Those aren't exactly casual subjects around here," she says slowly. "What brought you to them?" "Hearing things," he answers. Then, because evasiveness won't get him anywhere with someone who has that kind of watchful stare, he adds, "And I found some tapes down in a room under the station." "You mean the bunker?" she asks quietly. He blinks. "You know about it." "My father did," she says. "He was a medic. They brought some of them down off that mountain when he was still new to the job. Burns, lungs full of smoke, and God knows what." Her mouth tightens. "Then the men from Albuquerque came and took every file, every note, every photograph, told him to forget whatever he thought he saw." Her gaze flicks to the window. Rex has his paws on the edge of the truck bed, watching the door. A little boy, maybe 6, stands on the sidewalk looking up at the dog with huge eyes. The kid's mother reaches automatically to pull him back, but Rex simply lowers his head and lets the boy pat his nose. His tail swishes once, gentle and controlled. Maya watches the scene unfold in silence. When she looks back at Ethan, something has softened. "You brought proof?" she asks. He opens the folder and lays out copies of the tape's transcripts on the desk. He doesn't hand over the originals yet. That caution is too ingrained. But what she reads is enough. Color drains from her face. "I watched my father argue with them," she whispers. "He told them that kind of concentration of cancers doesn't happen in a town this size by coincidence. He got quiet after they left. Quiet in a way I didn't know how to fix." She looks up, eyes bright with a fury that has been banked for decades. "They said we were crazy," she says, "that we were imagining patterns, that the station was just broken weather gear." "Well," Ethan says, "your father wasn't crazy. Captain Mark Harlow corroborates everything he saw." Silence stretches between them, thick and heavy. Then Maya straightens, shoulders set. "The county archives are technically closed to the public," she says. "Most people wouldn't even know they exist. But we're not most people, are we, Mr. Cole?" "No, ma'am," he says. "Follow me." The archive room is in the back, behind a locked steel door that probably once guarded safety deposit boxes. The air in there is cool and dry. Metal shelving runs in rows, lined with boxes marked in neat, careful handwriting. Maya moves through the space like someone who has done this in her sleep. "These are what they missed," she says, trailing her hand along a shelf. "My father wasn't good at obedience. He copied everything he could before they made him hand over his files." She pulls down a box labeled Sandrock Medical Logs 7782, another marked Incident Reports, EPA, County, and yet another, thinner than the rest, with no label at all, just a smudge where ink once was. They spread the contents on a long table. For hours they work. Ethan flips through photocopied lab results, yellowed memos, handwritten notes in the margins. EPA reports with language that reeks of committee editing, inconclusive, within acceptable limits. Further study recommended but not necessary for continued operations. He sees graphs of contamination levels that spike right around the dates Harlow mentions on the tapes. Maya traces names with her finger. "Jose Alvarez," she murmurs. "Laryngeal carcinoma, age 32. That was my uncle." Another sheet. "Jenny McCarthy, leukemia." She sat 2 desks away from me in 3rd grade. Patterns emerge, clusters of illness radiating out from the mountain like ripples in a pond. Siren tests. logged as routine drills on days that show the highest contamination levels in the soil readings. Internal notes from a regional energy commission meeting talking about Black Mesa as a promising model for rural monitoring integration. In the unlabeled thin folder, they find something stranger, a copy of a letter never sent, handwritten, addressed to a national newspaper, unsigned. The words are careful, angry, and terrified all at once. They lay out in a tight page and a half. Everything Harlow put on tape. At the bottom, instead of a name, there's a single initial. M. Shemaiah stares at it. My father's name was Miguel, she says. He never mailed this. I found it after he died. I thought... She swallows. I thought he was losing his mind, seeing conspiracies he couldn't prove. I put it away. She looks at Ethan. You found the proof. Rex found the door, Ethan corrects. I just went through it. They both glance toward the front, where the dog is visible through the small square of glass in the archive door. He's dozing now, stretched out on the floor of the library, a group of kids sitting a respectful distance away, coloring at a little table. Every few minutes, one of them glances over at him like he's some kind of mythical creature. Children in this town learn to be afraid of sirens, Maya says quietly. For years, they meant fire on the mountain. I think they deserve to know why. We can't give them back what was taken, Ethan says, but we can take away the lie. How? She asks. They buried this once. They can try again. He thinks of journalists he's met in passing, veterans who turned to investigative work because they, too, needed something to fight. Of organizations whose entire job is to dig into government misconduct and drag it into daylight. We don't do it alone, he says. He taps the stack of documents. We do it with a paper trail no one can shred, with a community that backs it, with descendants who have faces and stories, not just names on charts. Maya's mouth tightens into something like a smile. Then we start with the people who have been waiting for this since before I was born, she says, and we make sure they hear it from us, not a headline. The next weeks are work of a different kind. In the mornings, Ethan patches the roof of the station, scrapes peeling paint, repairs the cracked water system, and rewires lights, turning the ruin into something habitable. Rex is always nearby, sometimes sunning himself on the pad outside, sometimes following Ethan up onto the tower, tail held out for balance as they climb. In the afternoons, he and Maya knock on doors. They sit at kitchen tables with old couples who remember hearing the sirens and being told to stay indoors and keep their windows shut, for practice. They talk to men in their 60s who cough into handkerchiefs and unfold medical bills like battle reports. 2. Women who lost brothers, parents, children, and were told it was just bad luck. Ethan tells them about Captain Mark Harlow. Maya shows them copies of the documents. Some people cry. Others get silent in that dangerous way of people who have been waiting a long time to be believed. No one is surprised. That mountain always had a mean streak, one rancher says, looking up at Black Mesa through his kitchen window. Good to know it wasn't the dirt that hated us. Eventually, word spreads beyond Sandrock. A woman in Albuquerque who runs a support group for environmental justice victims hears about the story and drives up. She brings contacts, reporters, lawyers, activists who know how to navigate bureaucracies. Ethan sends a copy of Harlow's tapes to a journalist whose brother he served with. The man calls him a week later, voice tight with emotion. This is going to make people angry, the reporter says. The right people, the kind who show up at hearings. Good, Ethan answers. Rex sits beside his chair, chin on Ethan's knee, as if he understands that the fight has shifted from hidden rooms to public ones. The government doesn't crumble overnight. No one shows up in black SUVs to slap cuffs on anyone. But the first article hits national news sites within a month. A label long buried in archived budgets, Project Sundial, Rural Monitoring Pilot, finds its way into headlines alongside words like cover-up and contamination. Hearings are scheduled. Old officials dodge cameras. Younger ones talk about learning from past mistakes and implementing better safeguards. It's not enough. It's a start. Back in Sandrock, something else begins to shift. For decades, Black Mesa has been a place kids dared each other to climb at night. A silhouette on the horizon associated with bad luck and strange sounds. Now, slowly, it starts to become something else. People drive up in pickup trucks not to sneak around the fences, but to talk. They bring paint, brushes, old photographs and frames. One day, Harris, the retired sheriff, arrives with his grandson Luke and 3 other men. They unload lumber, cement bags, and metal railing. "We heard you've been doing all the heavy lifting," Harris says. "Figured we'd help keep you from breaking your fool neck on that tower." They laugh while they work, short bursts of soft humor. They weld a new railing on the observation deck. They sand rust off the tower steps and repaint them. They build a ramp up from the parking pad so older folks don't have to climb the rough stone. No one says the word memorial out loud. It's written in every nail. One evening, as the sky bleeds red over the mesas, Ethan stands at the big window on the 2nd floor and watches the town lights blink on, one by one, in the valley below. Rex stands beside him, head just below Ethan's hand. "You did good, partner," Ethan murmurs, fingers scratching behind Rex's ears. "If you hadn't heard that wall," Rex leans into his side. The station feels different now, less like a bunker, more like a watch post. Not against enemy aircraft, but against the kind of forgetfulness that eats whole stories. The past isn't done with them yet. Maya arrives the next day with a stack of flyers. "We set a date," she announces, cheeks flushed from the climb, "for the dedication." Ethan raises an eyebrow. "Dedication?" "Don't play dumb," she says. "You knew this was coming." The evening of the ceremony, the road to Black Mesa is busier than Ethan has ever seen it. Trucks and cars ease up the switchbacks in a slow procession. Some have out-of-state plates, others are familiar. At the top, people spill out, shielding their eyes against the sun, looking around like they're seeing the place for the first time. Because, in a way, they are. The exterior walls have a fresh coat of paint. The rusted tower gleams with new steel in places. A simple steel plaque is bolted next to the door, engraved with words Ethan argued against and then lost that argument and is glad he did. Black Mesa Community, Watch Station, in honor of the unheard, may we never ignore them again. Near the edge of the platform, someone has set up a simple wooden podium with a microphone. Maya fusses with the cord, testing it with a firm, "Check, check. Can everyone hear me?" The speakers crackle to life. Ethan stands just behind her, one hand lightly resting on Rex's collar. The dog is in a formal sit, ears up, eyes scanning the gathered crowd. Children cling to parents' legs. Teenagers lean against trucks, trying to look unimpressed and failing. Older men and women hold worn photographs, folded letters, medical reports. Maya opens the ceremony. She doesn't give a long speech. She talks about Sandrock, about sirens in the night, and a silence that lasted longer than it ever should have. About a man named Miguel Ortiz who tried to put truth in a letter and never mailed it. Then she steps aside. "Ethan," she says softly, "it's your turn." He hates microphones. He hates being the focus of more than 3 people's attention at once. But he walks up anyway, because this night isn't about him. The microphone smells faintly of dust and someone else's cologne. He clears his throat and looks out at a sea of faces that, for once, aren't strangers to pain he understands. "My name is Ethan Cole," he says, voice steady. "Most of my life, I followed orders without knowing all the reasons behind them. Some of you did too. Some of you lived with the consequences when those reasons turned out to be wrong." Rex leans subtly into his leg, a point of contact that keeps him anchored. "There was a man who worked up here before any of us," Ethan continues. "Captain Mark Harlow. You don't know his name because someone decided you didn't need to. But he saw what was happening. He saw what this project was doing to this town, and instead of walking away, he left a record." He gestures toward the building. "In there's a room that was sealed up. Inside that room, there were tapes and notes, proof that what you lived through wasn't bad luck or a curse on this mountain. It was a choice made by people who never had to look you in the eye." A murmur ripples through the crowd. "Tonight," Ethan says, "we're doing what Harlow asked, what my own brothers who didn't make it home would have asked. We're speaking the truth where it can't be buried again. We're putting names and faces back where someone tried to erase them." He pauses, looks down at Rex. "This place was built to watch for danger," he says. "It failed the people below once. It doesn't get to fail them twice." He steps back. Maya returns to the microphone. "We thought," she says, smiling a little, "that if this station started its life as a warning system, It should go back to being one, a different kind. Behind her, on the tower, a newly restored siren housing sits gleaming in the last of the sun. It's been rewired, Maya says. It's not connected to any monitoring equipment. It will never sound for contamination or tests again. From now on, it's only going to sound for one thing. She looks out over the crowd. Remembrance. She nods to Harris, who stands near the base of the tower, one hand on a switch. "Ready, Sheriff?" she calls. "Been ready for 40 years, he answers. The sky has gone that deep, saturated orange that only happens in the desert. Shadows lengthen. The first stars prick through the blue overhead. "On behalf of everyone who never got an apology," Maya says, "and thanks to a dog with a good nose and a soldier who didn't know how to leave ghosts alone." The crowd laughs softly. "We dedicate this station to the truth, and we give Black Mesa its voice back." Harris throws the switch. For a heartbeat, nothing happens. Then the siren wakes up. The sound that pours out isn't the screaming wail that used to send kids diving under tables. It starts low, a long, rising note that threads through the air like a song. It climbs, holds, and then settles into a slow, steady pulse. Not an alarm, a heartbeat. People look up, faces lit first by sunset, then by something else. A kind of relief so sharp it almost hurts. Tears shine on more than one cheek. A woman in her 70s clutches a photograph of her younger brother to her chest. A teenage boy wearing a Sandrock Mustang's hoodie presses his lips together hard, blinking fast. Ethan feels his own throat tighten. Rex sits tall beside him, head lifted, ears flick toward the sound. His tail ticks once against Ethan's calf, like he's marking the rhythm. For the first time since he stood over Leo's body in that faraway valley, Ethan's chest doesn't feel like it's collapsing on itself. Instead, it feels full. Not just of grief, but of something that might one day be peace. Later, after the crowd drifts back down the mountain in a slow trail of headlights, Ethan and Rex remain. The station is quiet again, but not empty. Inside the once hidden room, the console is dark. On the wall opposite it, Maya and Ethan have hung a simple wooden board. Names are burned into it in neat, careful lines. Mark Harlow, Miguel Ortiz, and, beneath them, a growing list of Sandrock residents who chose to have their loved ones remembered here. At the bottom, someone insisted on adding one more line, for the uncounted. Ethan stands in the doorway, one hand on the frame. Rex pads in, nails clicking softly on the concrete. He circles once, then lies down at the base of the wall, like a sentry taking up his post. Ethan smiles faintly. "Guess this is our watch now," he says. He steps out onto the platform. The desert stretches below, endless and dark, the town a little cluster of lights. Above, the sky is a river of stars. The siren is silent, waiting for the next anniversary, the next gathering. Rex comes to lean against his leg, a quiet, solid presence. Ethan lays his hand on the dog's head. He came to Black Mesa thinking he was buying a ruin. What he found was a last mission. A fight not with rifles and breaching charges, but with records and testimonies, with patience and stubbornness. A fight to make sure voices drowned out once would not be drowned out again. He couldn't have done it without the dog who heard what he couldn't, who dragged him toward a door buried in stone and toward a truth buried in time. The story of Ethan and Rex on Black Mesa will become its own kind of local legend. Parents will bring their kids up to see the station, to point at the tower and say, "That's where we learned we weren't crazy. That's where we learned we matter." And somewhere out beyond the mesas, in offices and hearing rooms, the echo of what happened here will make it just a little harder for the next lie to stay buried. Because that's the quiet power of loyalty. Sometimes it's not about charging into gunfire or dragging someone out of a burning building. Sometimes it's about a dog refusing to ignore a sound no one else can hear. And a man choosing to listen, even when it hurts. Ethan thought the only way to survive was to get as far as possible from the past, to find a place where nobody knew his stories and nothing could remind him of what he'd lost. Instead, the mountain forced him to do the opposite. By listening to the echoes in its walls, by following Rex into the dark, he stepped straight into someone else's unfinished battle. He learned that the same kind of indifference that cost him his team had already hurt a whole town decades before he was born. And that truth came with a choice. He could walk away, tell himself it wasn't his mess to clean up. Or he could stay, shoulder the weight, and use his training, the discipline, the persistence, the refusal to let go, to fight a different kind of war, the war against silence. He stayed. He didn't do it alone. He had Maya's stubborn memory, Harris's quiet courage, a community's pent-up grief, and a dog who refused to leave his side when the ghost got too loud. The lesson in their story is simple and hard at the same time. We don't heal by pretending the past never happened. We heal by dragging it into the open, by giving names back to the forgotten, by saying, yes, this was real, and it was wrong, and it matters. And we rarely do that work alone. Sometimes the most faithful allies in that fight are the ones who can't speak at all, the friend who sits with us in the dark, the partner who leans against our leg when we're about to fall apart, the loyal soul who hears the danger before we do and nudges us toward the truth. When we listen to them, when we stand up with them, we don't just save ourselves. We become keepers of the light for everyone who comes after.